Tonight, an officer pulls you over. The lights flash behind you. Your heart starts racing. You pull to the side of the road, place your hands on the wheel, and before you even understand why you were stopped, the officer walks up and asks one simple question. Where are you coming from tonight? Most people answer instantly. Work. My friend's house. The gym. A bar. Dinner. It feels harmless, normal, routine. But what most people never realize is this. That question is not random. And in many situations, your answer can become the very thing that changes a routine stop into a criminal investigation. As a defense attorney, I've seen countless cases where people talk themselves into trouble without even realizing it. Not because they were criminals, not because they had something illegal in the car, but because they underestimated the purpose behind police questioning during roadside stops. And tonight, I want to explain exactly why you should think very carefully before answering where you're coming from during a police stop. Because one innocent conversation can create legal problems that last for years. Now, before we begin, this video is for educational purposes only and laws vary depending on your state and country. This is not individualized legal advice. And if you care about protecting your rights during police encounters, subscribe now because most people are never taught this information until it's too late. Let's start with the biggest misconception people have during traffic stops. Most people think officers are simply making conversation. They believe the officer is trying to be friendly, and sometimes officers are polite and professional. But make no mistake, police are trained investigators. Everything they ask has a purpose, especially questions that seem casual. Where are you coming from? Where are you headed? Have you had anything to drink tonight? Who are you visiting? These questions are designed to gather information, and more importantly, they are designed to evaluate you, your words, your tone, your body language, your nervousness, your consistency, everything. The moment you begin answering questions, the officer begins analyzing your responses for possible suspicion. Now let me explain why this matters so much. Imagine an officer pulls you over at night. You're tired, you're nervous. Maybe you were speeding slightly. The officer walks up and asks, "Where are you coming from?" You quickly say, "My cousin's house." Then the officer asks, "Where does your cousin live?" Now you hesitate. You stumble over the address. Suddenly the officer notices your nervousness. Now he asks more questions. How long were you there? Did you drink tonight? What were you doing? Who else was there? Do you see what just happened? A simple traffic stop slowly transformed into an investigation, not because the officer had evidence of a crime, but because conversation created opportunity. This is one of the most important things people fail to understand during police encounters. The more you talk, the more information police can use to extend the interaction. And here's the dangerous part. Even truthful people make mistakes under pressure. Innocent people forget details. They misspeak. They estimate times incorrectly. They confuse locations. Stress affects memory. That means even when you are completely innocent, your answers may accidentally sound suspicious. And once an officer believes your story is inconsistent, the stop can escalate very quickly. Now let's discuss the legal side of this. In the United States, during a lawful traffic stop, you are generally required to provide identifying documents. Usually this includes your driver's license, vehicle registration, proof of insurance. Depending on your state, you may also have to identify yourself verbally, but casual investigative questions are different. In many situations, you are not legally required to answer questions about where you were, where you're going, what you were doing, who you were with, whether you recently came from a party or bar, and this shocks people, because society conditions us to believe silence automatically makes us look guilty. But legally, exercising your constitutional rights is not evidence of guilt. In fact, experienced criminal defense attorneys constantly advise clients to say less during police encounters. Why? Because statements can be misunderstood, misquoted, taken out of context, or later used against you in court. Remember this. Police reports are written by officers, not by you. And once your words appear in a report, challenging them later becomes extremely difficult. Now let me give you a real-world example of how dangerous casual conversation can become. An officer stops a driver late at night for failing to signal. The driver is completely sober. No drugs, no warrants, nothing illegal. The officer asks, "Where are you coming from?" The driver says, "A friend's birthday party." Immediately, the officer becomes interested. Now the officer starts looking for signs of alcohol impairment. He asks, "How much did you drink?" The driver says, "Just one beer." Now the officer smells alcohol residue from earlier in the evening. Suddenly, what started as a minor traffic stop turns into a DUI investigation. The driver eventually passes the breath test, but the stop becomes longer, more stressful, and more invasive simply because of one answer. Could the officer still investigate without the statement? Possibly. But the statement opened the door. And that's the key lesson here. Your words give police pathways. Every answer creates new questions. Every detail creates new investigative directions. Now let's talk about another reason officers ask where you're coming from. They are often testing consistency. Suppose you answer, "I'm coming from work," but your clothes look casual, or maybe your passenger later says something different. Now the officer believes someone may be lying. Even small inconsistencies can dramatically change an officer's perception during a stop. And once suspicion increases, officers may begin searching for additional reasons to prolong the encounter. This is why many defense lawyers recommend short, respectful responses instead of detailed explanations. Notice I said respectful, because tone matters enormously. You should never scream at officers, never insult them, never become aggressive, never physically resist. The smartest legal strategy during a stop is calm professionalism. That means hands visible, sudden movements avoided, voice controlled, no arguing on the roadside. Roadside arguments rarely help you. Courtrooms exist for legal disputes. The roadside is not the place to fight your case emotionally. Now, some people watching may ask, if I refuse to answer, won't that make me look suspicious? Maybe, but here's what matters. There's a huge difference between appearing suspicious and legally providing evidence against yourself. You cannot always control an officer's assumptions, but you can control how much information you voluntarily provide. And many people don't realize this. Officers are trained to continue conversations because people naturally keep talking when nervous. Silence feels uncomfortable, so people begin filling the silence with explanations. They over-explain. They volunteer details nobody asked for, and sometimes they accidentally admit things that create probable cause for searches or arrests. I've seen situations where drivers talk themselves into vehicle searches by casually mentioning, "We were just at a party. My friend smoked earlier. There might be something in the trunk." Even nervous jokes can create problems. That's why disciplined communication matters during police encounters. Now let's discuss something extremely important. There is a legal difference between remaining silent and lying. You should never lie to police. Lying can create additional criminal exposure in some situations, but remaining silent is different. You can politely decline to answer investigative questions. For example, "Officer, I prefer not to answer questions." Or, "I'd like to remain silent." Those statements are very different from giving false information. And notice the wording: polite, calm, professional. That's critical, because the goal is not confrontation. The goal is protection. Now let's talk about why officers often ask where you're coming from before they even tell you why they stopped you. This is psychological strategy. The officer wants spontaneous answers, unprepared answers. Because spontaneous responses are easier to analyze for nervousness and inconsistency. If officers immediately explained every detail first, people would become more cautious with their words. So instead, many officers begin with conversation, and most citizens willingly provide information without realizing the legal implications. This is especially dangerous for young drivers. Many younger people are taught to always cooperate fully, no matter what. But cooperation and self-incrimination are not the same thing. Providing required documents is cooperation. Following lawful commands is cooperation. Not physically resisting is cooperation. But volunteering unnecessary information is a separate decision entirely. And many people regret that decision later. Now let's discuss another critical issue. Police are allowed to use your statements to develop reasonable suspicion. This is where many drivers unintentionally create legal risk. Suppose an officer asks, "Where are you coming from?" You answer, "A friend's house." The officer asks, "Did you drink tonight?" You nervously laugh and say, "Not really." That phrase alone can become significant, because "not really" is vague. Now the officer suspects possible impairment. Now you may be asked to exit the vehicle. Now field sobriety tests begin, all because of conversational escalation. And remember, many people are nervous during traffic stops even when innocent. But nervousness combined with inconsistent statements often increases officer suspicion. Now let's address a common misunderstanding online. Some people believe refusing questions guarantees officers will leave them alone. That is not true. An officer may still continue investigating if independent legal grounds exist, but refusing to answer unnecessary questions limits the amount of additional information available to the officer. That distinction matters. You cannot always stop an investigation, but you should avoid helping build one against yourself. Now I want to discuss the concept of fishing expeditions. This term refers to situations where officers ask broad questions hoping to uncover unrelated criminal activity. Questions like, where are you coming from? Who are you with? What's in the vehicle? Do you have anything illegal I should know about? These questions are often exploratory. The officer may not have evidence yet. They are looking for admissions, and many people unknowingly provide them. One statement leads to another, then another, until suddenly the officer has enough suspicion to justify further investigation. This is why experienced attorneys repeatedly say less. Now I know some viewers may feel uncomfortable with this advice. They may think, if you've done nothing wrong, why stay silent? Here's the answer. Because innocence does not protect people from misunderstandings. Innocent people get arrested. Innocent people get charged. Innocent people say things inaccurately under stress. And once your words are recorded, prosecutors may interpret them in the worst possible light. That's reality. Now let's talk about body camera footage. Today, many police encounters are recorded. That means every statement you make can potentially appear in court. Jurors may later watch your interaction. Prosecutors may analyze your wording carefully. Even sarcasm can be misinterpreted. This is another reason disciplined communication matters so much. Now let's discuss a smart approach if you're ever stopped. First, pull over safely. Second, keep your hands visible. Third, provide required documents when asked. Fourth, stay calm and respectful. Fifth, avoid volunteering unnecessary information. Simple, professional, controlled. If the officer asks, where are you coming from? You can politely respond, I prefer not to answer questions. If the officer continues, why not? You can calmly say, I'm choosing to remain silent. No attitude, no insults, no sudden movements, no lectures about constitutional law on the roadside. Remember, your objective is to get home safely while protecting your legal position. Now let's discuss consent searches because this connects directly to roadside questioning. Many searches happen because drivers talk too much. An officer may begin casually, where are you coming from tonight? Then, mind if I take a quick look in the car? And nervous drivers often say yes, even when they had the legal right to refuse. Why? Because the conversation gradually lowered their guard. This is why police communication techniques are so effective. They create comfort before escalation, and most people don't recognize the transition happening in real time. Now here's something extremely important. Invoking your rights does not mean being anti-police. You can respect law enforcement while still protecting yourself legally. Those two things are not opposites. In fact, many attorneys advise clients to remain respectful specifically because aggressive behavior often worsens encounters. Professionalism protects you. Emotion usually hurts you. Now let's address another major issue. People often believe honesty alone guarantees safety. Unfortunately, that is not always true. Imagine you honestly admit, yes, officer, I came from a bar, but I only had one drink. Now the officer has direct justification to investigate possible impairment. Even truthful admissions can create legal exposure. Again, the issue is not morality. The issue is evidence. Police gather evidence. Your statements are evidence. That is why lawyers consistently warn clients about voluntary roadside conversations. Now let's discuss one more critical point. Many people panic during silence. The officer stops talking, the car becomes quiet, and suddenly drivers begin explaining things nobody asked about. I'm just tired from work. I know I was speeding a little. I only checked my phone for 1 second. Those admissions matter, and once spoken, they cannot be taken back. Silence feels uncomfortable, but legally, silence is often safer than uncontrolled talking. Now let's be realistic. Not every officer is trying to trap you. Many officers conduct professional, lawful stops every day, but the legal system still allows your statements to be used against you. That's why understanding your rights matters regardless of the officer's intentions. This is about legal protection, not hostility. Now I want to talk directly to younger viewers. If you're young, nervous, or inexperienced with police encounters, remember this. You do not have to impress officers with explanations. You do not have to talk your way out of everything. And you definitely should not volunteer information because you feel pressured by silence. Calm, respectful, minimal communication. That approach protects people far more effectively than nervous over-explaining. And parents watching this should teach their children these principles early, because one poorly handled stop can affect someone's future permanently. Criminal charges, license suspension, searches, arrests, court appearances, thousands in legal fees, all beginning with simple roadside conversation. Now before we finish, let me make something absolutely clear. This video is not encouraging hostility toward police. It is encouraging awareness. There's a difference. Knowing your rights is not anti-law enforcement. Exercising constitutional protections is not criminal behavior. And understanding how investigations work can prevent life-changing mistakes. So remember this: the next time flashing lights appear behind your car, you are required to comply with lawful orders. You are generally required to provide identification documents. But you should think very carefully before answering investigative questions like, "Where are you coming from tonight?" Because the safest words during a police stop are often the words you never say, and one unnecessary conversation can become evidence that follows you for years. If you found this video valuable and want more real legal education about police encounters, constitutional rights, self-defense laws, and the mistakes that get ordinary people arrested, subscribe now. Because the law protects people who understand it, and ignorance of your rights can become extremely expensive. Stay safe, stay calm, and protect yourself legally.